Hello, today I'm joined once again by my friend Mr. David Lindley. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Mr. David Mintz. How are you?
I am superb, thank you. I'm superb. Now, today we're going to be talking about something that I think gets into the headlines inadvertently. We know that there's a lot of property and a lot of wealth tied up with an older generation that might not necessarily need all that space. And you want to talk about the opportunities that come out of that. So I'm going to hand over to you, Mr. David.
Yeah, very appropriate. Headlines is the word. There's been some headlines today. So what are we, 17th September?
Yeah.
Headlines today about this subject as well. So I think there's a big and growing opportunity here for agents to get into this downsizing market. But let me try and explain why. So let me share my screen. If I do that, share. Right. Okay. Are we cooking? Can you see?
I can see the blue screen.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So, why is downsizing an interesting market for UK estate agents? So, I think that there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, firstly, if you just look at what we're talking about here, so in terms of the value of a downsizer's home, if you even take London out of the picture, then the average price of a home, by the way, I've got loads of stats in this. I've got all the sources for any anoraks there that want to go into it. This isn't just made up, but anyway, I won't bore you with that. Anyway, the average price for downsizing homes is £800,000, which I think you'd be hard pushed to find an estate agency across the country that would not want more £800,000 instructions.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a
just
sizable sum.
for reference, London's double that in a bit. What Rand's network is mainly out of London, isn't it, or has it got some London
So
presence too?
it's got some London coverage as well. Yeah, it's got quite good coverage across the country. So yeah, you have a real spread, and I think with RAN, those two figures will be something that's familiar to both types of agents. So those that are in London will understand that higher value, and then that average price, I think is it's a very like you said, which agent wouldn't want more of those instructions on? It's a very sizable. We're not talking average property price, are we? This is what way above, and it's a good fee that's going to come off those sort of instructions.
Totally, yeah. If you said a 1.5% fee, which for those that do a bit in the premium market is about average really, then that's a £12,000 fee. That's great money. And it is not only it's lucrative, but it's also a growing market, which I can hopefully demonstrate to you now as well. So, like, why is it growing? Why are so many people downsizing? So last year, getting on for half of movers actually reduced their bedroom count, and that's a massive step up from year on year. We'll go into the reasons why in a minute, but that change has been the highest level since 2016. So there is this growing demographic as the population gets older and they're in the bigger houses. What are they going to do with them, and so on? There's that obvious one, but there's lots of other reasons why this is this is a growing trend, and I really think it's quite a rich theme for agents to pay attention to in the coming years. So I think there's five key factors why people are downsizing in such big numbers. First one is just energy costs. Like
Yeah.
we all know, energy costs have gone up, they're going up, they continue to go up. It's September and I'm bloody freezing at the moment. I'm wearing 3 layers. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, if you were to move from a 5 bed to a 3 bed, then homeowners can save, best part of £4,000 a year on energy bills, which is not insignificant. And then as well, that's not to mention you get the council tax savings as well if you to move to a smaller property. So there is day-to-day running costs of a property that makes it more attractive to be in a smaller one for people that have the spare room. Obviously, mortgages is a big one and has been the last couple of years. So if good our good friend Liz was 2 years ago, was it? It
Yeah.
must have been close to the day 2 years ago.
It seems like it was sooner than that, but yeah, I think it's about 2 years ago now, wasn't it? That we had that momentary turmoil in the market, but then it did something that has been irreversible, which is increase those, the mortgage rates. We are not going to see the same rates again now for perhaps for a generation, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that you're right. And even taking the previous slide, but the running costs into account, but there'd be a lot of people that are still on those pre-trust rates, like that, 5 year, 3 year fixed still haven't quite fed through into the market, which is interesting to say the least. And whether that's sustainable for them or not when those fixed terms end, who knows? And obviously, it's more attractive for them to be mortgage free because they become better buyers. So when they look to downsize in the market, then what's interesting, I guess, just because of the age and the length of time they've been in the property, 3/4 of them really are paying in cash for the property that they moved to. They're releasing all that equity and so on. And again, that's an increase, a massive increase year on year. So you see in this trend of them selling the big family home, taking some cash off the table, buying the next property in cash so they can be better buyers and have the pick of the bunch, so to speak. Coming on to your point about headlines with our big scary Labour government and what are they going to do to us?
I love that emoji. That's like the "we've got a Labour government" emoji.
I mean, ironically for this, it might help or hindrance, who knows? I'll let you be the judge of that. So I'll share a couple of bits which I thought was quite interesting. So, okay, I know a little bit here at the time of recording. I don't know whether this will come out, but we're jumping the gun ahead of the budget next month. But, everything that Starmer's talking about is very much sort of gearing us up for the wealthier paying more taxes and not taxing more on the non-working and all the sort of stuff he said during the general election and so on.
Yeah.
And then you've got, in addition to that, you've got still think of them as downsizers, but people in bigger family homes with kids at private school or considering sending to private school or what have you. If they're adding that onto that, which I think they are in January, that's a significant cost. They might have one eye on the house, one eye on the education, depending on their own circumstances as well. So there's a lot going on there. But interestingly, and why you said headlines, literally this morning we had a double whammy of downsizing relevant information in just our little old industry press. So this is Property Industry Eye, where Rachel Reeves here is talking about removing some of the sort of tax, not loopholes, I guess incentives, or making the inheritance tax more strict, especially around the family homes.
Yep.
So I suppose within there you could look at it and take a view to say that's more incentive for someone to sell their family home rather than hang on to it and pass it on in their will to their children, for example. So and she's got a black hole to make up, so as is her will, so she can do that. And then also I think this is the Negotiator this morning. It's a Rachel Reeves double whammy for you this morning, David. You lucky boy. So this is where the OECD, which is, he reads,
the Office for Economic, is it the?
Go on.
It's well, I know the OECD is the one that Liz Truss should have listened to, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's on the screen though, so you could have cheated. Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. Yeah, so that one we're very familiar with. Anyway, they said to abolish stamp duty. And go, okay, well that'd be interesting because it discourages people from moving for better job prospects or to downsize retirement, hampering the reallocation of housing in a tight market.
Very true.
Yeah,
very true.
I think that's very true, and I think there's obviously, hence the sort of scary emoji thing. But like everyone thinks that's scary. What are the Labour going to do? And there's all the pay, and they keep.
And I'll tell you why that's very true. Because if you've lived in your house for 30, 40 years, as a lot of downsizers, typical downsizers would have done, you are then going out to buy. You're hoping to be mortgage free. You're going to see another 30, 40K of stamp duty as being really, really like not appetizing because it's dead money, isn't it? It's just a tax. And you've always been told this is your single biggest tax-free asset. Well, it is until you have to buy another single biggest tax-free asset and pay the government along the way. So I think actually you're right. I think that's enough to make people think twice sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a funny thing to think, given everything that we've been sort of primed for in the news about how much pain is coming. That something like that for our industry could be, or it could pour petrol all over it potentially. I mean, I don't know what you think about that because obviously we had a bit of a flavour of that in COVID, didn't we? And that was interesting for prices and so on. I don't know whether you think that'd be a good thing or a bad thing.
Sometimes I get to the point where I think that that any kind of change like that could be good because it stimulates people to do something different. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
So on your point there about their tax-free asset and moving and so on. So of course there's financial implications of them downsizing too. So they save on average £118,000 in moving, and then also there's somewhat obvious, but just put the stats on it. By downsize the number of bedrooms, the amount they save on the next purchase. I mean, interestingly, for the London agents, there was a release of 1.062 million from moving from a 5 bed to a 3 bed. But however, it's in the northeast where they recoup the most. So
Yeah.
about 65% of their 5 bedroom property value either go to a 3, which is the highest of any region. I don't know why the northeast, sorry, does so well about that. You're a northeasterner. No, you're a northwesterner, aren't you?
I'm a Northwesterner, me.
We
Yeah.
wouldn't go near the northeast.
I once famously won an award that covered the Northwest and the Northeast. I didn't deserve it, but it must have angered a lot of agents in Newcastle. That's all I could say.
Yeah, yeah, they wouldn't have taken one to that. I'm glad you said it was an agency award, not an award for something else. Anyway, so that's a bit of a thought process of why downsizing is a lucrative market and why it's probably set to grow as a segment of the market and something that is quite lucrative for us as well. So how do we actually target these people? Well, a few thoughts about how we do that. So the first one is, the obvious thing is to target that demographic in quite a specific way. And the thing that comes to mind, maybe unfairly, and I'll explain what I mean in a minute, is more traditional marketing when it comes to downsizers. So looking at printed mediums, things going through the door. We use a system which allows us to filter by age, length of residency, council tax bands, and so on, or it just has a filter which says downsizers. So that kind of makes it quite easy. We click the button and we can email those people, direct mail those people, which is quite useful. But I think that's a little bit unfair, and this always kind of catches me out when I look at it. But I actually think the social media is underrated when it comes to this market as well. So our biggest audience segment when we look on I say Meta, but really on Facebook, is women aged 65 and over, by far and away the biggest category of people that interact with us and view our posts and so on. So I don't think you could just immediately assume that they're not on socials, because they quite often are. Weirdly, I found out the other day that my dad's on TikTok. I was like, I'm not on TikTok. What the hell are you doing on TikTok? And he's buying stuff on TikTok, like towels. I'm like, well, I don't even know you can buy stuff on TikTok. It's weird. So anyway, I think that you can say that they're not on social media, but perhaps choosing the right platforms and maybe kind of in age order, go TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, something like that, probably in terms of the priority. Certainly that's what we see with the ones that are the best.
Here it's about, I suppose this is what Simon Ledbetter talks about a lot, profiling that particular audience, getting to know their, you need to know their ages, you need to then decide how best to target them.
Yeah, and he's obviously the guru at this, but I think it is about if you decide that you want to go after one person, like your customer avatar, I think that they call it quite often, where you say, okay, that is the person, that's the perfect customer for us. Who are they? Where do they go? Where do they shop? What do they want? What would they need help with? And go after them that way, rather than just a shotgun approach for everyone. So I think, like, in terms of an agent watching this, maybe is to not necessarily do anything that I'm saying, but just think about in their area, how can they carve out something which is specifically for downsizers. So, like, one example that we do is we create like guides, ebooks, and we put them to try and get a bit of tangible benefit out of them. What we do is we put them behind like a data capture form on our website. So we have lots of different ones, like staging your home or dealing with price reductions or preparing to move or whatever. One of them is about how to successfully downsize your home. So we create content specifically for those people. We see when they download them, and we can have a conversation with them on that basis, which is just a nicer, more gentle way of opening that up as well, and looking helpful and looking like the experts in that area. I would say, I know I'm biased, but I would say I think you need a premium offering. You're still talking about, on average, across the whole country, an £800,000 property. So I think that they're going to want something which, aligns with them in terms of the branding of what they're selling their house through, in terms of the service they receive. And I think that, come back to what you said, David, earlier, if they've lived in that house a long time, 30 years, say, well, even if they've lived in there 10 years, think about how much has changed in our industry in the last 10 years, especially around marketing properties. That's chalk and cheese compared to when they maybe bought. So having that handheld service from market appraisal to completion is very important. Having something that differentiates you from the competition to make sure that you can justify that. the other thing is that you do get very high fee levels in this particular market as well if you can demonstrate that service. They want to pay for a premium offering that handheld service from start to finish. So all of that is important. Again, I'm going to reference you in this, David. Let's just say they have been there for 30 years. Then you need specific services for them. So, quite often you'll find that they've not been modernized, or if they have, they're done in a particular style, let's say, and they might need a bit of help with that. So whether that be staging and styling physically, where painting walls, putting in furniture, neutralizing, that sort of stuff. Obviously, there's virtual options that you can do as well, which I think are very effective. Or, it depends on the customer, the budget, the property, and what they're looking to achieve out of it as well. But having that extra level of offering helps with instructions and raise the fee level as well. And then, funny one perhaps to say is like emotional ties. I was talking to someone about this at the weekend, that they've just moved and they were laughing about how unemotional they were about moving. They just didn't care, and the person that was buying it was so emotional about their property, they couldn't get their head around it. But especially I think where you get empty nesters, for example, families growing up there, kids have moved out, whatever's happened there, there's a lot of emotional baggage, but there's also like there's also physical baggage as well, just stuff that's accumulated over the years.
The stuff, and downsizing is not something that's easy for people to do, because it's, you've accumulated a lifetime of memories and things. More importantly, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just the stuff, it's the memories that's attached to them. So what we've done in the past as well, I didn't even know this was a business, but it is you can have professional declutterers. I'm like, more power to them. That looks like a hard day's night to me, but they're there and they can go through someone's house with them sensitively but practically and help them do that. Because even just the mental hurdle of having to think about that, let alone actually do it, could be enough to put some people off actually moving. So I think all of those things around it, that as the service is not just sticking it on Rightmove, is important if you want to capture this market. And I do think it's quite an important market. So look, there we go. I think like social, political, cost of living, all these factors that we talked about today suggest that this is a lucrative market, and it's one that's growing. We've not even really talked about just this aging population that we have necessarily as well. But with those larger properties and a more personalised service comes a higher fee level and at premium prices as well. 800,000 in out of London. What do we say? 1.6, 1.7 in. So I think it's something that agents should really give some thought to for the next year's planning, maybe.
And I suppose for relocation agent network members as well, it's also that time in life where if you're looking at downsizing and you're going to take advantage of the fact that you're going to become mortgage free for the first time in forever, it will feel like that way for a lot of those clients. They may also time it with retirement, with perhaps moving to a different area, relocating. So I think there's great opportunities here amongst that age group, and great opportunity for referrals across the network, I suppose.
You're totally right. An example of that, I was thinking about my parents. Their family house sold, moved to, it's like a caricature, a bungalow in Dorset. It's like you couldn't get more scripted than that, could you? But that's exactly what they do. So yeah, I think that there's loads of opportunity here. So I thought that'd be an interesting topic, and maybe timely, even today, timely with the news that's come out. But we'll see what happens to us all on the 30th of October.
We've been pre-warned this time, so we know that we're not getting good news, but again, I think all of these sort of changes, like I said earlier, negative and positive, puts agents in a position where I think people start to make decisions on their property. I think stability, funnily enough, where we're all just pootering along at the same interest rate, everything, life is okay, doesn't make people move home. And I think it's the other changes in life that tends to sort of stimulate a market a little bit more, for better or for worse. And there's going to be fallout, and there's going to be challenges for us all to deal with. But
you said this on Simon Gates's podcast, didn't you?
I did say this. I
did.
You
said it on there. It's controversial opinion.
It's fast becoming my mantra, but I believe that I think if you look at that post-COVID market, was just the classic example. None of us expected to sort of do the sort of business that we did, because we anticipated that people would take longer to recover. Well, we didn't anticipate that human nature is very, very strong, and that we all like to try and control our own destinies as much as possible. people take control. So, if the government dish out bad news in the next budget, then
Yeah.
people, homeowners, want to take control one way or the other and make a decision. So it's up to the agents, I suppose, to position themselves in the best possible place to help them.
I really agree. And actually, I didn't include it in this because I thought this was going to become War and Peace. But it's funny you mentioned it. Do you remember we had the race for space at the end of COVID? Well, sorry,
Yes.
actually during COVID, really.
Yeah.
And that was all fueled with the stamp duty stuff as well. And now that I haven't looked into this enough to say it with authority, but apparently there's a bit of an opposite happening where people are, oh God, I don't want this massive garden I've got to deal with, or I want to go on holiday abroad more, and they actually want to offload those properties and
Yeah.
go back into cities and be in smaller properties and live a more cosmopolitan lifestyle as well. So there's that element to all of this subject too. So yeah, I didn't include that and haven't done the research enough to hang my hat on it, but I've heard enough about it to kind of think, yeah, that makes a bit of sense.
No, it makes real sense. David, thank you very much. I think this is it is very, very valuable. And I think it's something that we don't, because we don't always as agents target that audience group as much as we should do. We tend to sort of go all in on first time buyers and younger buyers and sellers. But when you look at that demographic of downsizers, there's a lot of property there, isn't
Why
there?
do you think that is? Why do we do that? Like, sorry, I know it's a little bit off topic for the webinar, but
Well,
generally,
I think that we are it's drummed into us by all sorts of sources that first time buyers are kind of like start your market off, and they're the people that are marching along with mortgages in their pockets and so on. They're working, and you tend to disregard your retired audience as being kind of like, well, we'll never hear from them until they're ready to go to a bungalow, but they're ready to go. You need to talk to them. You need to stimulate that conversation. There's a lot of upsides to them downsizing. And
yeah,
actually, I have to say, you're doing a social good at the same time because you're freeing up the properties for younger people.
oh,
And
totally.
it just makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. I really agree. I really agree. But anyway, thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity. I hope that was interesting.
It
Um,
was interesting, and we will see you again soon.
cheers, Dave.